From a truce to continuing attacks on Gaza's Indonesian hospital, the following report takes a look at the major updates as the Israel-Hamas war enters its 47th day.
Israel and Hamas have agreed to a temporary pause in the war that will enable the release of about 50 persons who have been held captive in Gaza since the Hamas armed group stormed southern Israel on October the 7th in exchange for Palestinians held in Israeli jails. The Israeli cabinet backed the agreement after talks on a Qatar-mediated deal that continued into the early hours of Wednesday morning, with Israeli media reporting heated exchanges between ministers of Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's government. The Prime Minister's office said the deal would require Hamas to release at least 50 women and children during a 4-day truce. For every additional 10 hostages released, the pause would be extended by a day, it said, without mentioning the release of Palestinian prisoners in exchange. Hamas, which controls Gaza, also released a statement confirming that 50 women and children held in the territory would be freed in exchange for Israel releasing 150 Palestinian women and children from Israeli jails. It said that Israel would also stop all military actions in Gaza and that hundreds of trucks carrying humanitarian, medical and fuel aid would be allowed into the territory. This accord is the first truce of a war in which Israel has flattened vast swaths of Gaza, which houses about 2.3 million people. Palestinian officials say at least 14,100 people have been killed, while the United Nations says about 1.7 million people have been forced from their homes. Hamas killed at least 1,400 people in its initial attack on Israel. Officials from Qatar, the United States, Israel, and Hamas have for days been suggesting a deal was imminent. In a statement issued later, Qatar confirmed the success of mediation efforts, which also involved Egypt and the United States, and confirmed the broad parameters of the agreement. About 237 captives from Israel and several other countries are believed to be in Gaza, and President Biden said some Americans would be released during the upcoming pause. Other foreign nationals are not thought to be part of the agreement. Hamas has only released 4 captives since the abductions took place more than a month ago: an American mother, her daughter, and 2 elderly Israeli women.
Well, joining us to discuss this is an international law expert, Livingston Wachie. He joins us from our Abuja studio. It's good to have you join us on The World Now. Well, you have reviewed the details of this, I would call it, fragile truce deal. What do you make of it, and does it mean we see an end to the killings in Gaza?
Well, you see, what has happened is what can best be described as an armistice. You have a temporary peace line which has brought cheers within the international community, particularly the superpower blocs, commending and cheering this development that was made possible by Qatar in concert with the United States. When you talk about achieving a sustainable peace between Israel and Palestine, that to me comes like a tall order, because it looks like an almost impossible task because of the history surrounding this whole conflict. Hamas, yes, an Islamic resistance movement, has maintained its position to decimate and wipe out Israel from the face of the earth. And that is the same disposition Israel is having to ensure that Hamas is wiped out, which, given the surprise attack of October 7, a lot has now come to play, because it can best be said that the devil is in the details in trying to establish sustainable peace. There are doubts between Hamas and Israel. I believe they are still at daggers drawn. Within the Israeli war cabinet, there are those who voted against this move for a ceasefire, the temporary pause, because they feel it will be a very dangerous precedence, as well as a sign of weakness, which to them Hamas will explore to further cause harm and wreak havoc on Israel. But you see, the life of people, that is women and children and all the hostages, are at stake here, which is the major factor in this whole arrangement for the pauses, which will take place for the next 4 days. I I appreciate the commitment by Benjamin Netanyahu of Israel, saying that the release of 10 hostages will amount to further pauses and more days of seizure of hostilities in this whole process. But you see, I want to use this medium to say that the international opportunity should strongly explore this window to gather more momentum towards enhancing the diplomatic tracks that are now available, because it appears that diplomacy is bringing solution to this matter. When you compare it to the Russia-Ukraine war, which has defied every diplomatic intervention. In this case, if diplomacy can further be explored.
I was going to come to that, because earlier today we saw Pope Francis saying that the Israel-Gaza war has transcended from a war to a terrorism. In your perspective, I would like to ask that, what do you think should be the role of the international community to end this war? Because some persons or analysts have said that the international community seems to be sitting on the sidelines just watching Israel decimate Gaza.
The international community, who is even the international community? When they refer to these terms, international community, you're barely talking about the powers that are competing among themselves over control of global policies and enforcements of same. The United States and its allies, NATO on one hand, China, Russia on one hand, and so on. So it has to do with the competing interests between these superpowers. But in the circumstance, it is strongly recommended, just as some analysts and watchers have said, that this diplomatic channel that is now open should be strongly explored to see how solution can be brought. Now, you realize that there have been several proposals. The 1967 proposal that draws the line between the borders, drawing the line between Israel and Palestine. You know that there have been a binational proposal for a one-state solution, as well as a two-state solution for Israel and Palestine, and so on. And none of these have worked because the population between these two countries are so intertwined. The border lines are so difficult to delineate. And as such, it becomes very, very difficult, because as one proposal has come that there should be a land swap, because if you want to move from one city to the other within Palestine, you will still pass through Israel. So it's more like if you want to go from Abuja to Kaduna, you have to pass through Cameroon. So how do you now delineate or draw these border lines? It becomes so complicated. So I think one of the best proposals at this point in time is for parties to sit down and agree. There has to be agreed terms, because there have been, of course, border delineations where citizens of certain countries are allowed or given the option of making voluntary citizenship swap into either becoming citizens of the new country or maintaining your citizenship status. But this has to be done democratically. If there remains the option of decimation, like Hamas is insisting that they want to wipe out Israel, then the trust factor will play out. Because what is playing out and making the whole negotiation difficult is that these two parties do not respect themselves. And mind you, this is not a war between two countries per se. It's a war between Israel, that is an independent state, and Hamas, that is regarded as a terrorist organization. So maybe if from that perspective you're drawing the view of terrorism, that is it. You can now say it is a war on terror, against terror, as it were. But if Palestine is now owning Hamas, which it appears to be doing by its own silent consent, then Israel is at war by itself against a terrorist organization, and then the backing organizations such as Palestine, Iran, and Syria. But the unfortunate side of this whole scenario is that the lives of innocent people are going down, and Hamas is using civilians as shields. They are using civilian shields to protect themselves. You can't even draw the line between who is Hamas or who is an innocent citizen. So they have to sit down. That is why the recommendation is strongly made that this window for armistice or a ceasefire that is at play now has to be strongly explored by the diplomatic community to further draw the table for peace, so that the cessation, because mind you, ceasefire does not mean end of war, and ceasefire does not also amount to peace. But if it can be properly explored and momentum is gathered, the diplomatic tracks that are already in play can help achieve a measure of that peace that is required between these two countries at this critical time that has brought serious threat to the global peace.
Very quickly, sir, I would like to ask that one wonders how Israel and Hamas, now that's the Hamas fighters, would gain from this humanitarian pause, because just like you hinted earlier, that this humanitarian pause could hurt Prime Minister Netanyahu politically. Do you think it would also benefit Israel's military? Very quickly, your response.
I think the biggest beneficiaries for this humanitarian for this pause is the humanitarian angle, where people will be allowed either to move out from the Gaza Strip, or humanitarian intervention such as fuel, medicals, and water will now come in. It will not be it's not going to be a thing of state or territorial benefits as at now. The stage for states and territorial benefits is not yet in sight until both parties choose permanent ceasure of hostilities, which is almost impossible, because even while there is a cessation of fire, there is still the tendency that there may be attacks, because you're dealing with Hamas. You're not dealing with a regular conventional human being. You're dealing with a group of people who have an agenda for the total destruction and annihilation of Israel. And Israel is holding them responsible with that type of mindset, because they remain gun pointed against each other until the terms for which that level of trust can be established will come to play. But as at now, there is not yet in sight territorial or state benefits with respect to the cessation of fire until that comes to play through exploration of further diplomatic channels. But mind you, for the records, this is not a war between two states. It's a war between a state and a supposed terrorist organization, and it's a very dangerous trend.
International law expert Livingston Wache, thank you so much for talking to us on TVC News World Now.